Okay, so I know we are going over pseudocode in our meeting, but I wanted to make this video for people that had to miss it this week or just as something you can go back and view again um, if you just forgot and needed a review. Sorry, I got distracted by a comment on my other YouTube video. Okay, so first I'm going to tell you what your problem is, what your assignment is, and then we're going to walk you through how to pseudocode it. So at its very core, pseudocode is just you using comments above where you start coding to plan out how you're going to solve your problem or how you're going to complete your task. You've probably heard the word algorithm before. So step-by-step process of how you're going to solve the problem is just an algorithm. So at the end of the day, all you're doing with pseudocode is writing out your algorithm to help you better plan out what parts you need in your program and maybe certain variables or functions you want to use. You don't have to explicitly put like variable names or functions that you want to use in your program. I do it sometimes to help me, or if it's something I think I'm going to forget once I'm going through and actually writing my code. But very bare bones pseudocode is just what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. So let's give you the scenario. You have been given the task of making a calculator for a website that sells black market COVID-19 vaccines. So your very sketchy client wants this calculator to figure out the subtotal based on how many vaccines were bought and show the user what that is. They want you to figure out the tax based on the subtotal, so just number of vaccines times price per vaccine, figure out the tax on that, show the user what their tax is. They want you to add in a flat shipping rate and show the user what that shipping rate is. And last but not least, they want you to show the user the grand total. So the subtotal plus the tax plus the shipping. Things you would need to know to solve this problem are the price of each vaccine, the tax rate, the flat shipping fee, and to solve the problem, I need to tell you that the user will input how many vaccines they want. So this is kind of what the example output should look like, right? You have a line where your user enters how many vaccines they want, and then the computer does this, right? It says your subtotal is blah, your tax is blah, your shipping is $45 no matter what, and then the grand total is just all of these numbers added up, and it shows the user the grand total. So when we do our planning, the first thing we ask ourselves is, how would I solve this problem, quote unquote, in real life? Before I think about anything Python specific or anything programming specific, what do I need to do? Okay, so the first thing we need to do to solve this problem is get the number of vaccines the user wants, right? So that's what we're going to type. Okay, perfect. So how would we get the subtotal? Well, the subtotal is just the number of vaccines times the price, right? So you could say compute subtotal by multiplying number of vaccines by 500. All right, cool. And then we have to display the subtotal, right? So okay, makes sense. What else do we have to do? We have to calculate the tax. Okay. So get the tax by multiplying the subtotal by 15%. Okay, that makes sense. We also want it to display the tax. That's what our client wants. Okay, we're almost done. That's pretty easy. Shipping rate is defined for us. That's pretty straightforward. So all we would really have to do there is display it. Okay, so then next we have to figure out the grand total and then show it. So I'm going to start with figuring it out, right? So compute grand total by adding subtotal, tax, and shipping, and then just display the subtotal. Now, if you were taking an actual Python class, this would be good enough for some professors. Because, right, we kind of solved the problem, right? We broke it down step by step, and that's how we would figure out the subtotal in real life. If you want to go one step further, you can get a little more programmy with it. So, for example, how are we going to get the number of vaccines the user wants? Well, we have to know what function it is, but we need to store it in a variable, right? So we could say vaccines. This is where I'm saying this variable that stores this information is going to be called numVaccines. Now this says compute the subtotal by multiplying the number of vaccines by 500, but how is the computer going to know what that 500 is? So if we really wanted to be thorough, we could say define variable for vaccine price. And we would set this variable equal to 500, right? Now you could compute the subtotal by multiplying the number of vaccines by 500. Truthfully, we would want to store this number in a variable too, right? Subtotal seems like a good variable name for me. Display the subtotal. Okay, that's going to be just a print statement, but that's me thinking ahead. Get the tax by multiplying the subtotal by 15%. Well, how are we going to do that? First, we need to establish a variable for the tax rate. Define variable for tax rate. Now we can do this, right? Because the computer has something holding this 15%. Display the tax, that's just going to be a print statement. Display the shipping rate. Well, again, we need a variable to hold that shipping rate. I can just call it shipping, show that to the user, compute the grand total by adding the subtotal, tax, and shipping. You could define this, you should define this number to a variable, because otherwise when you go to display it, the computer won't have anything to reference. We'll call it grand total. Oh, and this is a typo, sorry. And now you can actually display the grand total because you will have a variable to reference. So that is the basics of pseudocode. If I were actually doing this project, I would go down here and I would start typing code. But that is what we are doing for now. So I hope that made sense. I'm always here if you have any questions, and I will talk to you soon.